Thanks, Anthony, for reinforcing all the support that Fife Council gives us. I think there was one word that Anthony mentioned, and Christopher did as well, and it's something that we're quite keen to stress as far as the campaign is concerned. And that is, it's not just about a railway link, it's about dealing with the kind of lack of confidence and the kind of negative perception that so many people have in this area. And we see the rail link, not that the rail link's going to solve it in itself, but would create conditions where young people, particularly in future generations, would have a brighter outlook, would feel, yeah, there is a life outside Leven and Methil. There are jobs. I can go to uni and college outside the area, because that's kind of missing at the moment. And I'd like us all to just remember that. It's not about an engineering project. It's about what that does to people's values and expectations. Our next speaker is Paul McCartney from Peter Brett Associates. If you haven't come across the name before, that's Peter Brett, not Paul McCartney. Let me just explain that when Hamza Yousaf at the end of September made a declaration in Parliament that he was going to be funding Instruct Transport Scotland to fund the next stage of the process, he of course had made a verbal slip-up, and he didn't say anything of the sort. What he actually meant was he was going to ask Transport Scotland to take responsibility for reviewing the business case and in effect for carrying out another stag. This news, I'll be perfectly honest, was not greeted with great glee by those of us in the campaign. Nevertheless, we have met, there was consultation earlier on last week with Paul and his colleagues, and I think there's a general feeling that, hey, yes, maybe this is really going to help. But to tell you much more about the process, can I invite Paul up to speak, please?
Good morning, everyone. As Eugene said, I'm just going to give you an update on the ongoing work on the Leven Sustainable Transport Study, which I think is commonly known as in these parts as stag number 3. Just as a bit of background first, as Eugene said, my name is Paul McCartney. I'm Director of Transport Economics at Peter Brett Associates. We're undertaking this work on behalf of Transport Scotland in collaboration with Fife Council. The study itself, the Leven Transport Study, the purpose of the study is as shown on the slide, to identify options to improve sustainable transport connectivity for the area of Levenmouth in Fife with a view to improving its economic vitality. So as background to that, people may be aware that the previous study was commissioned, it was actually in 2015 but undertaken in 2016. Following that study, Transport Scotland invited us to review the stag appraisal, and as part of that review we identified some limitations and potential weaknesses in the work, which meant that it probably wasn't as robust as what it should have been. We were then asked to fill in the gaps associated with that. We're not saying that the study was actually wrong, there was just some missing elements to it that suggested that some of the processes that had been undertaken weren't as robust as what they could have been in terms of the stag process. One of the key issues that we identified was the limitations and the evidence provided about what the transport problems and transport objectives, issues, constraints and indeed opportunities in the study. And that is a key element of the study because you really need to understand what the transport problems are, what the issues are, what the opportunities that are not being materialised are, to ensure that when you arrive at the solution you then identify through the appraisal process, and I'll come to speak about that, you end up with the right solution. The solution that's going to solve your problems. The solution that's going to ensure that the opportunities that are not being realised at the moment will be realised. So we've been invited, commissioned by Transport Scotland, to then take the study, progress it. We're not starting from scratch, I should really emphasise that. What we're doing is building on the work that is there and making sure that the gaps that we've identified so far are filled, and then will allow a robust STAG process, which Transport Scotland will then take on to the next stage. For those not familiar with STAG, apologies in advance for this is the technical dry part of the presentations. The STAG process in itself is a four-stage process that ensures that by the end of the fourth stage, you arrive at a robust value for money solution, a solution that will solve the problems that you've identified and hopefully help you realise the opportunities that are not being materialised. The first stage in the STAG process is about gathering evidence about what the problems are, what are the issues, what are the opportunities that are not being materialised, as I've said. If you don't have a good understanding of what the problems are, what is it you're actually trying to solve? You know, what are the constraints in the existing provision of transport services? What are the issues? If you don't have a good understanding of all of this, once you get to the end, it's very, very likely you're going to end up with the wrong solution. So we need to gather a significant evidence base of what it is we're trying to solve. And I'll come on to speak about that. But after you've done that, there will be an you then set your objectives. There will be an appraisal of, well, what options can we look at to try and solve our problems? And through the Transport Scotland STAG process, they'll look at the impacts. Well, what are the economic impacts going to be? What are the social impacts going to be that are associated with these options that we're looking at? You know, how will it help social inclusion? How will it help integration? How will it impact on the environment? So there's a qualitative exercise to then say, right, okay, let's look at the options that we need to assess the impact of that will try and help and solve our problems that we've identified. That is then narrowed down and filtered down to a short list where there's a much more detailed examination of these options, including looking at, you know, transport models, a much more detailed exercise in looking at what are the economic impacts of these options going to be, what are the social impacts of these options going to be. At the end, you will then, hopefully by going through this process, arrive at a value for money solution that will solve your problems. But the STAG report was recently undertaken didn't really have enough evidence of what the problems, opportunities, issues were. And that is a key theme, is what we're trying to do. And we've started that process. And I've met some of you already to discuss that, and I'll just speak a little bit about that now. The key thing we want to do is what really, and I don't want to labour this point, but it's so important about what are the problems associated with the Levenmouth area in terms of transport. What are the issues? You know, what are the opportunities that are not being realised? So by the time we get to look at our options, we can find the one that's going to address all of this. So we've been undertaking an exercise at the moment. This is called the pre-appraisal exercise, where we're gathering evidence, we're speaking to people through a wide-ranging engagement programme and plan. You know, we'll be speaking to council departments, we'll be speaking to operators in the transport industry, we'll be speaking to businesses, we'll be speaking to those involved in discussion earlier with regards to tourism. We'll be speaking to people about what are the environmental impacts associated with the transport network as it stands at the moment. We'll be speaking, when we have spoken to elected officials and MSPs, we'll be speaking to people who are interested in active travel. Again, that's one of the solutions that we'll be looking at associated with public transport or road or whatever solution we're appraising. We'll be speaking to other groups such as emergency services, other local groups and departments within Transport Scotland. We've started that engagement exercise. We've had 2 workshops last week, one with many of you here, the local campaign groups, and another one with elected officials, both local and national Parliament officials, And we went through that process in understanding, and I should say I was quite struck. I don't think the previous stag actually captured a lot of what we discussed last week. I was particularly struck by, and Eugene referred to it earlier, about the social impact that the current provision of transport is having in the local area, and how it's dampening ambitions and aspirations for young people and progressing their career development, accessing education. And these are things which I think were very limited in the previous stag report, but really, really important. And understanding, how is transport impacting not just on the economy through tourism and businesses, but the significant social impact that it's having. And like I say, myself and my colleagues were very struck with the evidence that was provided last week to demonstrate that. And that's something we're really going to pick up on. And I think that needs to be reflected in the stag report. So some of the previous findings, I'll just talk through just a few of these, and issues such as journey times to key destinations, access to services, access to employment, access to health, access to education. It's quite clear from the evidence that we've analysed and the findings from some of the workshops that getting access, getting out, people getting in, the journey times are quite significant. The frequencies, the timetable, the interchange issues are it's quite clear that getting to Edinburgh, even beyond, even up to Dundee, there are significant issues with if you don't have access to a car with public transport, and the interchange, the number of buses you have to get, etc. That has also having an impact on sustainable travel choices, and it's one of the things that's an important part of the stag. What are the environmental impacts associated with the transport provision? We're looking at congestion on the roads. So this is just a flavour of some of the evidence we need to gather, and particularly on opportunities that are not being realised as well. The current transport provision, the services that have been provided are discouraging inward investment, for example. Speakers earlier talked about the lack of opportunities for tourists to come to the area, and that's something again was very strong in our discussions and as part of the engagement. So this is just a small list of some of the issues that have been picked up before, with the poor access to services in particular. But I think there was a strong focus. I'm not saying that the focus was wrong, but I think there was a very, very strong focus on the economic aspects and less on the social. And I think we really need to get that into the study. The next steps, as we say, we're going through the engagement process at the moment. We'll be speaking to businesses, one-to-one telephone discussions. We'll be having an online survey, a public survey for people to access, and that will be well publicised nearer the time. We will have a survey for businesses, and then once we've gathered all of that information and understand what it is that we're actually trying to solve, the next stage will then be to go on, right, okay, what options can we look at? And rail will be an option, but we have to look at other options as well, because the stag process really needs to ensure that you've covered all the potential opportunities and options. We will then go through the appraisal process qualitatively and in a more detailed appraisal process as part of the Part 2 analysis. This overall process will run through the summer and beyond into the autumn. We're hoping to have the study finished. We're aiming to have the study finished, or we have to have the study finished, by autumn of this year, October or November. But we will be coming back, and because we want to ensure it's a transparent process, we will be coming back and speaking to the groups that we've spoken to already, allowing them or feeding back to them so that they understand the process that we've gone through, how we arrive at the decisions, allowing them to feedback and input to that process, so that it is an inclusive process. It's not our study, it's your study, and we need you to feed into that. So that's, like I say, I'd be happy to take questions later, but that's a very much a summary of what we're doing and why we're doing this and the process that we're going through. If anybody has anything they think they want to feed in, and this is my email address, and we'd be more than happy to come to speak to you if you're not already as part of our engagement plan. So thank you very much.